When looking back at my life, analyzing what has worked best, I found one particular method that has worked the best. And this is shamelessly cloning what someone else did that worked, especially if I had talked with that person or seen them do that in action. Then usually something snapped in me and I could apply the same methods myself. And usually I would see some similar result. Experimenting and inventing myself has given suboptimal results. Also, listening to the advice from the wrong people has given lukewarm results. And when looking back, it can be silly to have listened to someone who actually haven't achieved the results themselves. But in the moment, two pieces of advice from two very different people can seem of similar value. And this is what Charlie Munger calls the misweighing bias. We think that two options have the same value, while one option might give amazing results and the other might lead to horrible results. And cloning the right person, the right people, can compensate for this behavior. And let me explain further how this works. If we follow the career advice or financial advice from a poor person, we will probably end up like them, a 90 to 95% certainty. But if we instead listen to and imitate what a successful person does, we increase our odds of having a similar result as them and being successful. So copying and cloning the right people increases our odds heavily. And when it comes to capital allocation, investing and business, we really want to have the odds in our favor. We really want to have an advantage. And this is when we can make bets. You might have heard that 90 to 95% of businesses fail within the first 5 or 10 years. But if we would clone a successful person, a successful business owner, chances are that that number would come down quite radically. I bet that most people in this statistic experiment a lot, want to try out all their own ideas and see themselves as too good to clone or copy what someone else is doing. But of the percentages of businesses that make it, many of those entrepreneurs are shameless cloners. They might see one type of business in one country that is doing really well and ask themselves, why can't I start a similar business in my country? Or they might see a business model that works really well in one industry and ask themselves, why can't I apply the same model in my industry? One example of this is Sam Walton, who founded Walmart. The Walmart family is one of the wealthiest families in the world because they just never sold their stock. Combined as a family, they hold about 45% of this company, which is an insanely high number. You might think that Sam Walton, he was really an inventive guy and that he tried lots of new ideas of his own. But in the reality, he was a shameless cloner. He spent more time in competitors' stores than his own, and wanted to see what they were doing that was working so that he could apply it in his own stores. On one trip to Brazil, he was actually put in jail because the police thought he was a lunatic because they found him crawling around in a supermarket when he was measuring the width of the aisles. For a long time I had the belief, if I just keep doing what I'm doing, eventually I will be successful and it will be working. But this is not a very intelligent way to think. In fact, I have witnessed this behavior among many struggling entrepreneurs and dreamers. They have their head in the clouds and are blind to the reality that's in front of them. So I threw this idea out because I saw it wasn't working. I started asking myself, if I had already achieved this goal, what actions did I take to achieve it? Then I put a lot of time and focus on this specific activity, and that worked a lot better. After a while, I started asking myself, what one or two people could I emulate that have the results that I want to have and that live a life that I want to live? This became a very powerful guideline, and it changed the way how I interacted with others, how I perceived myself and what I did. When cloning others, there are some pitfalls to look out for. Let me explain. Let's say a person wants to emulate Warren Buffett and they start to go through the recordings of the Berkshire Hathaway meetings, they read the annual letters, and they soon get a clear idea of what he recommends for most people to invest in the S&P 500 in a low-cost index fund. So then they might make the assumption, if we just follow the advice of Warren Buffett, invest in a low-cost index fund, we will be as rich as Warren Buffett. This could actually be a mental trap or a faulty, oversimplified way of thinking. I think the reason why Warren Buffett advises most people to invest in a low-cost index fund is because then they will be reasonably safe. They will also have a protection from inflation. It's also a simple way for him to help people to have more sound finances, because if they would take a few percentage of their income and dedicate towards investments rather than consumption, they would have a slow, steady growth of their net worth. But if someone would want to clone Warren Buffett, should they invest in index funds? Probably not. Warren, he is an active investor who spends all day long looking for businesses that he wants to invest in or buy. When he finds something that is highly undervalued, he goes in and buys it. And this is quite a different approach from investing in index funds. If a person would want to clone Warren Buffett, they could consider starting their own mini Berkshire Hathaway and invest in undervalued assets. They could take their existing company, redesign it and make it more like a holding company or an investment company. Instead of taking out a huge salary, they could keep that money in the company to be reinvested. If a person would want to clone Warren Buffett, they should also stay within their circle of competence. They could gather a lot of cash, and when the right opportunity presents itself, they could go all in. And this is usually a time when most people are too scared or too afraid to invest. So a person who wants to emulate Warren Buffett could also start think more in logical ways, from thinking from numbers, being more rational, compared to most people who make decisions based on emotions, based on fear and based on hybris or emotional decisions. So a person who wants to emulate Warren Buffett could, for example, start doing things that he's doing. And simple things like writing letters of gratitude, sending out to people they admire or friends. This would amplify their brand and create lots of goodwill that could come back to them in the future. So now that we know the power of shameless cloning, who is a person that you would like to clone? I hope you learned the same amount of me as when I created this video. Thank you so much for watching and see you next week.